I have broken ground on a new project recently, and it's called Rails UI, and it's at railsui.com. So I wanted to kind of walk through it just to give you an idea of what's to come with it. It's very in its primitive state, so I don't even honestly know some of the features that might be part of it, but it's me more or less scratching my own itch with something with Rails that, from a designer's perspective, I feel like is lacking. It's totally maybe overkill for some developers, maybe, but to me, it's when you approach Rails, there is a view component to the framework. So to me, that should be also important as much as like the logic behind the scenes, like the models and controllers and whatnot. So with Rails UI, I'm thinking of it as a set of UI components and templates that are going to make Rails a little more awesome from the start. So you will essentially install this as a gem. It's going to be an engine that mounts to your Rails app and gives you this kind of bolted on logic that gives you some stuff that's taken care of in terms of UI. So you get like button components, all these types of components based on a CSS framework you choose. Right now, I have it using Bootstrap as well as CSS or Tailwind CSS as the initial support for. There are other frameworks out there that I might use. I initially was thinking of Bulma down the line, but for now, I think these are the two that I feel like are the most in use today. So if you find more, you have more voice on that opinion, let me know, and maybe I could add to the mix eventually. There's a lot to do with this, so from a single designer standpoint, it's a big undertaking, but I think it's something that I'd really like to contribute towards and kind of give back to the community with. Even though part of this I do kind of anticipate charging for eventually. So the idea behind it though is you'd install this gem, you'd run an installation for Rails UI, and then you'd take some parameters that you want to set or install from there, configure the app in such a way, and then kind of go with from there. So I'll give you, it'll basically be me as your product designer, so to speak. So it's kind of like if you come from the Tailwind world, you might know of Tailwind UI and maybe the Bootstrap world where there's custom themes and stuff like that that are for sale. This is kind of that, but like integrated straight into Rails. So I've found that a lot of developers are having to take like Next.js templates from Tailwind UI and are having that pain of copying it over to like ERB or Haml templates. And that's a pain if you've ever had to do that. So to me, it's more or less not taking Tailwind UI and just copying it because that's like stealing. It's me creating my own version from scratch and then using that and giving it, my own take on it. And then inside the UI, it's at railsui.com is just a sign up form right now. But behind the scenes, I have like it running locally. A pre-configured app already have an active theme called Retriever. For some reason, I used a dog naming convention. So there's like a dog breed for each theme that will be installed. So far, I have 4 themes already. 2 will be for Bootstrap, 2 will be for Tailwind, and the themes coincide with the idea of marketing pages. So to give you some perspective, say you installed a Bootstrap theme, which this is running currently. It's Bootstrap. You would pick your CSS framework of choice, so Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS to start. And then you can select from 2 themes. You can't see that in this view because this is already pre-installed. And once you install it, it's kind of done. So I don't really make it editable once you install it. So it needs to be done for new Rails apps. So that's something to take into account. Maybe eventually I'll support changing an existing Rails app. But that would be pretty tough to kind of anticipate what you might have done past a certain point. So that's something to be said. This is for new Rails apps. From there, though, I wanted to show just like a template you can install. You could choose from an about page and a pricing page to start with. My thought is kind of gearing this around SaaS-based apps, so more or less the Rails world's kind of in that mindset. It's typically a SaaS-based app that you're building. Maybe not though. You could build so many things with Rails. So that comes with a pre-designed template that I created from scratch. It uses some fictitious copy and of course logos and stuff like that too. But think of it as a starting point or kickoff point for you to take and run with. Some of them have different categories. So in this case, it's more or less like an agency feel or something like that, or a software company in aspect. So the about page here is like the company page. And then I also include a pricing page that has the typical SaaS look with the 3-up concept. So this would be like a Bootstrap example. So this is fully themed, fully configurable. It installs, with an installer script and everything if you want it to on the fly. And you can even choose if you don't want to install those pages, you can do that. I do also include like custom scaffold templates for that. And then all these other components. So in this case, in Bootstrap world, a lot of this stuff's predefined, but I tweak it a bit and then include snippets for the common Rails patterns that we use, like ERB and Haml, where it makes sense. Sometimes it's just HTML because you're going to just use the HTML component. But all in all, it's just kind of some guidelines for usage, and then also just how those will look based on the theming and colors that I selected. There will come a point where I feel like you can customize the color. I did start creating this as like you could customize the font, the color, and I feel like that's a little, for a developer's perspective, that's overwhelming. I feel like you're buying into this because you want to have that decided for you. So I feel like unless you really want to change the color, which you could go back and do once it's installed, that's something I just kind of decided for you to make your life easier. But I'd love to hear feedback on that if that's not the case. And then, so just some components, form elements, what you'd see in the typical Bootstrap documentation. A lot of it's over here in the smaller minified format. And then just some stuff that we typically see in Rails apps, like validation layers, layout patterns, components like alerts and flashes. And then eventually there'll be some scaffolding. I'm still working on that part. So like when you run Rails generate scaffold, whatever resource, it'll scaffold out templates there, and then you can have some predefined data as well as the UI around it. Obviously that needs to be very generic so it can, accommodate, but that's to come. And then of course we got typography for this specific theme. So basically it's the answer to design for Rails apps, and it's my idea of integrating that directly into it. If you want to see, this is another theme for Tailwind that I've included. It will be, just kind of a guide that I've called this one Hound, and I have it at pages.dev. This one is retriever.pages.dev if you want to check those out. These are just static versions that I've created just as previews, so to speak. And then the pricing page here is kind of inspired by some of what Tailwind UI is doing, but it's more or less my take on it too. So some of that stuff's carried over, and then we, just have the typical pricing patterns and whatnot you see in a lot of SaaS. So that's what I've been up to. I'm trying this out. It's more or less going to be, trial and error with it. I've scratched my own itch because I wanted to have something that's kind of like, I don't have to always redesign devise views or something like that. That's going to be added to this too. Like you'll have that pre-designed based on the CSS framework and theme you choose. That stuff will just come out of the gate. You can like just hit the ground running with the logic side of the equation and have the design component almost hashed out. So that's kind of the guide here and the way I'll go about it. So right now, my idea is just to kind of release it slowly as a beta or alpha even, just to the people on that list, just to get some feedback, and then also just to see what is missing, what you'd prefer to have, what more control you would want and whatnot. So the way this would work, though, if you wanted to read this real quick, is just to create a custom configuration YAML file. So when that gets generated in your new app that has a set of like criteria that your Rails UI configuration will have, based on that, we'll install certain dependencies and any necessary assets. So it'll go and fetch stuff that I've either pre-designed or copy over templates that have pre-designed UI. And then generates a specific design system for you. So that design system we were talking about here. And then back to, let's go back there. Then it will install, if you want, those marketing pages that we just previewed. So stuff like this, if you want that as at least a means to start with. And then finally, if you do want to enhance the app to use the scaffold templates, we'll add that as well. That is something you can add to your configuration to override the defaults and then add your own. It's pretty simple actually with Rails, but just knowing what that looks like and how to design around it's kind of complex. So that's something I'm trying to take care of with this. So I'm curious of your feedback. If you have anything, or if you think this project is cool, could see some potential with it, love to hear any feedback you have. I guess my biggest ask, if you want to hear more about it and news about it, I'm probably going to post maybe progress updates as I'm working on it more, and just show you what's going into the behind the scenes of it. But yeah, just subscribe here, give your email, and I'll email you directly if you want to be one of the early alpha users. That'll be free to start, so no strings attached there. Just would love some feedback is all I'd ask. So I think that's it. Excited to finally announce this. So it's been a big undertaking, and I've learned a lot about engines and gems, authoring gems and whatnot. So I'll probably do more, some stuff, guides around doing stuff like that as well, if you're interested. So I think that's it. All right. Peace.